Welcome to the Behavior Speak podcast. Now, here's your host, Ben Ryman.
Welcome to another episode of the Behavior Speak podcast. I'm your host, Ben, as always. Today, excited to have Wes Lowery on the show with us. Wes is a behavior analyst down in San Diego. So nice to talk to someone in the same time zone. So we're both, have the same amount of sleep, which is fun. Wes works in, I'm not going to spend too long sort of telling you about Wes. I'm going to let him tell you about himself, but I'll leave it at Wes. Wes is not practicing sort of standard ABA. He's using ABA in some really kind of cool ways in a cool population with some cool people. And we're going to get into that a little deeper today. But I guess if you've read the title of the podcast, you'll know it's got something to do with sports. So Wes, thanks for being on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to get into everything that we're going to talk about today.
Me too. Really looking forward to it. Wes and I had a really good pre-chat a couple weeks back, and the conversation flowed nice, and really neat to kind of see kind of what's happening there in our field, outside of that kind of autism sort of sphere. It's a lot of, as most listeners will know, most of our practitioners practice in kind of the area of autism, and there's been a few folks that have taken things sort of, outside of that box, but it's really nice to see it being taken into some, kind of mainstream activities. We know ABA is a great way of improving the quality of learning, and well, we know we can learn about pretty much anything. So it's just wonderful to see folks like Wes bringing our science and our technology kind of into other realms. I think it's we can do all the podcasts and journal articles and whatever we want to disseminate, but I think one of the best ways to disseminate the science of our field is to actually go and do that work in other fields, and Wes and his team are just a amazing example of that. Before we kind of get into what Wes is doing these days, it would be great if you could just kind of as a lot of the podcasts do, give us a bit of your origin story. Kind of tell us kind of how you got into the field, and it likely kind of probably took you in the autism direction as it does for a lot of folks. So how it took you from the autism focus to kind of the kind of work you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Wes, BCBA. I got started in the field of ABA very similar to how 90% of us get started within the field of ABA, and that's through early childhood intervention at an ABA clinic. When I started in the field of behavior analysis, I didn't necessarily know exactly what direction I wanted to go in. I just knew that I was really fascinated by the science of behavior and why people did what they did, and sort of the reason behind, but also why didn't they do one thing over another. So essentially, the whole go, no go type of idea. Obviously, I didn't have those type of wording and stuff like that as I was starting in as an undergrad. But that's where my mind was sort of heading in that direction, is why people do what they do. And so, I stumbled upon the degree and started taking some courses and just absolutely fell in love with it. Got the opportunity to work at a clinic out in North Texas with early childhood practice. Did that for a few years. Again, for me, I was able to, really get a chance to observe and really fully get that full experience of like, what does it look like to change behavior, but also, change the environment around to then determine, right, how does this affect behavior with the early learner with the autism diagnoses. From there, as we all, those who practice within the clinical side or in home base, we all have clients that have limited diets or limited sort of preference with their food options and their selections, which then leads to them primarily eating only goldfish and chicken nuggets. We use them as reinforcers. We use them, and when the parents just need them to eat something, right? That's sometimes just our go-to, just to make sure that they're getting calories in for the day. Yeah. And so, with that, I started to sort of brainstorm the idea of how can we, use this science to help this same population, but not only with, communication skills, self-help skills, stuff like that, but also just overall health and wellness. And so that's what kind of pushed me in the direction of sports health and fitness within ABA.
Right on. Where'd you go to grad school?
One of the best programs in the nation, the University of North Texas.
Nice.
Yeah, no, we
Good
had a
plug.
blast. I was very, 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 very lucky to be a part of that program. And I say that, there's tons of other great programs. I've met some other colleagues who are, fantastic, coming from different programs. So, I'm definitely not the one to criticize others or, whatever. It's not that. I just really appreciated my experience because it allowed me to, they really allowed me to kind of poke around and see and really kind of get my hands dirty across multiple sort of areas within ABA and not just only stay focused under one thesis advisor or one professor. Now, for those who kind of know their direction and what they want to do and how they want to, lay out their career path, if that's your preference, that's great. That's perfect. But I think for me, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, I wasn't sure exactly on kind of where I wanted to go. So having options available to be able to bounce around different labs, work with different professors. I believe I worked with at least all of our professors, either on some project, either as a research assistant or just at least joining their labs just to observe and give feedback on data and procedures and methods was very helpful because then, like I said, I just got a chance to see the world of ABA outside of autism on a weekly basis. So for me, I think a lot of it started just with my early graduate school training.
Right. Yeah. And that I won't lie, I'm a bit jealous already, and I can see why you'd, paint the picture of UNT being the greatest. And I don't see anything wrong with being proud of your alma mater. But I think, and forgive me, Joe Lucician, my thesis advisor, but I'm going to actually slam my program a little bit. In that, I enjoyed my program. I was at the University of British Columbia, and I enjoyed it, and it was wonderful, and I don't have really anything negative to say about it. But it wasn't a degree in applied behavior analysis; it was a degree in special education, and so. With the 5 or 6 course VCS sequence or whatever, but with that in mind, there wasn't a lot of options to sort of bounce from sort of lab to lab, as you put it. Or we had literally 2 professors, and one was doing some really nice work in kind of positive behavior support, and the other one was doing some nice work in in more kind of the augmentative communication realm. But that's it. That's all we had. There was no sort of, we had no, experimental labs. We had no, labs in sort of all these different areas, which I know there's a lot in the States. And so I always felt like, I was missing out on, an opportunity to kind of learn about different options. And it's only really in the last couple of years, and certainly through doing this podcast, that I've learned that there are so many other realms of ABA. I knew about OBM, I knew about safety, but maybe that'd probably be it, really. So that's neat that you had so many opportunities. I
think. Sorry, I want to add on that, which I think there's a lot of students that are maybe in that situation or similar situations to where maybe they're in remote areas and they don't have options to kind of explore outside of kind of what they have available. But I think a lot of it for me, right, because a lot of my graduate study was, I would probably say like 60% or 70% of it was autism care treatment. So it's not the fact that, hey, I was able to bounce around equally across the labs. There was times where I was able to spend more time than others with some, but to be full transparent, a lot of my graduate career was early autism training. But the take home point here with it all, right, for all the students who may be listening, that may be in a similar situation, is that, you really need to learn and pay attention to the science, right, behind applied behavior analysis, so that, when you're in the early childhood setting, you're able to apply it, but then you're able to then take those same procedures and methods and sort of take that outside of the autism care treatment. So it's still possible, to kind of still get outside of of that realm. You just have to be open to the idea of, ABA isn't just autism, and then vice versa.
Yeah, fair point for sure. And I think that's sort of the piece I'm kind of referring to, is that when I kind of compare degrees with in applied behavior analysis versus sorts of these other kinds of master's level degrees that are BCBA track but not specifically ABA, and so there may be an MA or an MEd in some other realm. I don't know that that's always the focus. I don't know that there's sort of, here's this underlying science, and that's really what we want to talk about. It always seems to be kind of geared towards, let's talk more about autism and not so much about the science. Or let's talk about sort of different pieces. Let's talk about functional assessment. Let's talk about, some of those pieces, but not get into, like, I don't think we, spent a whole lot of time even on Skinner, whereas in an actual ABA degree, you're going to spend a lot of time on Skinner. And so, so I think sort of that underlying science sort of message that you're sending here, which I think is really important, that we can apply it in so many different areas. That wasn't the message that I got. The message I got was kids with autism and adults with autism do really well with ABA. So let's talk about how we can use ABA with those populations. I really like that sort of perspective that you got from there. And, ABA being kind of for the most part, an American institution, it's around the world now. It makes sense that the American universities are going to potentially offer a lot more options. But kind of getting into a sort of why, or what we're talking about today, and you're saying about how ABA is a science that kind of transfers over to sort of a whole lot of different realms. That's kind of the direction you went. So when you graduated, first off, was your degree like a thesis track or the other option, which I always forget what they call that?
It was it was a thesis track. So we had to do, I think it was like 2.5 years of coursework, and then we had to finish out a master's thesis with the internship out of it as well.
What was your thesis on or related to? Do you remember?
Yeah, I have to think back. It was evaluating reinforcement efficacy across a progressive ratio schedule.
Okay.
So really looking at how effective are our reinforcers that we're providing for our clients within session, based on how difficult the task is or how long they've been working. So, for example, a lot of us, nowadays, we usually look at the reinforcer being, some type of electronic device, whether it's iPad or tablet or, some type of game. Sometimes there's actual tangible items and stuff like that. But what we were finding out was, the whole idea of like satiation. Right. And so when does that kick in, and when does it when does performance start to kind of plateau with a pretty simple task, right? Something that's mastered, something they can do, but it was being introduced on a progressive ratio schedule in regards to when the reinforcer could be delivered. So we were looking for the breaking point in that schedule to then determine how powerful this reinforcer was across the multiple reinforcers. So then we first had to identify our hierarchy of our reinforcers from high preferred to low preferred reinforcers, and then determine which one of those actually sustained performance much longer. And then, like I said, we just used basic, simple, I think there was just like fine motor, one step task that they all knew how to do, which was mastered. It was either, putting beads on the string, coins in the bucket, or something simple, right? Something very simple, to where it didn't require a ton of complexity. It didn't, require any instructions.
Yeah.
It's just hey, do as much as you like.
Yeah.
And then we provided reinforcement across that schedule. If you were to ask me what the results were, it's been a long time. So I looked at the data, but I can tell you the methods.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I wouldn't dream of asking you the results of your own study.
I'm gonna have to pull the paper up, but
Yeah,
I'm actually very surprised I remembered so much of it just now after so many years.
No, you did well. I mean, I know you were struggling to remember the title, and you got right into it, so that's cool. So after you graduated, were you kind of continuing to work in sort of the autism area?
Yeah, so I stayed in it, and I'm actually still in it as well.
Okay.
We all have our hands in it, some form or another, because that's where our bread and butter is, and that's where we and we also still do great work within the autism care treatment. So yeah, I went into it and been working with families ever since I graduated. I'm still in early childhood, but then started dabbling into, like I said, the health stuff, health and exercise first, right outside of in my last year of graduate school. And then from there, I've just always just been kind of exploring and sort of trying to do research and looking at it within the back, sort of keeping it in the back burner until, I was able to kind of get a better idea of how we can do that. But then also when I connected with the TeamABA and started doing research, it was kind of taking off from there. So that's how I kind of morphed into this realm in this area as well.
So how, maybe just tell us a bit about kind of how you went from sort of thinking about health and looking into it to joining TeamABA, and maybe tell us maybe a little bit of history about TeamABA itself, but kind of maybe before you got there.
Yeah, for sure. So I ended up meeting up with our founder of TeamABA. His name is Kurt Kirby. He's based out of the East Coast, DC, Maryland area. And I connected with him at ABAI, which, any students listening, and I highly encourage you guys to go to whenever we start going back again, because it's the greatest networking opportunities, and you really get opportunity to really learn a lot from other folks. But I met up with him, and he's already been connected with a couple other big names within the field of ABA. One of those persons were Rick Cabina, one of the top guys in precision teaching. And so when I met Kirk, it was for me, it was more of the idea of how can we get childhood obesity addressed, right? How can we get our clients, eating better, exercising more, and we can go through it by these different procedures within ABA. And so as we were talking, he was mentioning to me, he was like, well, have you thought about implementing or utilizing precision teaching within sports health and fitness? And I was like, well, I know a little bit about it. I did a course on it, and we did a section within one of our courses in grad school, but I wasn't too familiar with it at the time. And so he started explaining, like the benefits of it and kind of going into it and talking about, how everything's going to be standardized. We can really do fluency training here. We can look at mastery. And then we can also look at predicting performance with athletes. And then from there, I was like, everything makes a lot more sense now. Because if we can, if we can train a basketball player to, let's say a quarterback, right? If we could train or teach a quarterback how to go through their reads much more efficiently or much quicker, but then also know certain stimulus conditions that the defense is presenting will most likely lead to this certain outcome. So then, right, if the quarterback then knows those antecedent conditions or those stimulus conditions, they then know how to kind of better respond in those situations, opposed to then trying to wing it or try to be the hero, you know what I mean? Just trying and then just trying to create. So we're getting away from the idea of like, let's just see what happens, and more of, okay, when this person drops in the past, based on their film, but also based on the data that we've been able to collect about the opposing team, but also just for that position in general, then we know what our sort of discrete options are, because they can only do so many things within that certain area unless they move to a different spot on the field and then other opportunities open up. But when they're in that one particular sector or section on the field or on the court, there's only so many things that you can do. And if we're able to identify all those different possibilities and those different options, and then narrow down which one's going to be most preferred for them to do and what they're most used to doing, then our quarterback can make that read much quicker, and then either guide or do something different within their own performance to make that play.
Wow. Okay. Lots to unpack there. So, I mean, it's which is cool. So it sounds like you're, well, maybe before we kind of get into the technicalities of it all, because it really sounds like you're analyzing a lot of different variables, which I kind of want to get into, but I'm wondering, just so for the listeners out there like myself who aren't really, don't spend a lot of time in sort of the team sports realm. We might exercise or we might do whatever. I do try to stay fit. But I've never kind of lasted on a sports team for more than a couple days in my life. And in fact, my closest experience now to sort of being on a sports team, and it's been kind of a nice redo, is I'm a volunteer in our local fire department, and so there is there's that sort of team approach. But that's as far as I've gone. I digress about me. How does sort of using ABA to teach folks, how does what you're doing differ from sort of traditional coaching? If you're planning on collecting continuing education credits for this podcast, you'll need to go to www.cbiconsultants.com and enter the 3 secret words. The first secret word is performance.
For sure. So let's go with an example outside of like team sports, like you said, correct? Right. We're talking about let's talk about personal training for a second.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of us, if we have an interest in, getting stronger, losing weight, or just wanted to be more active in our daily lives, right? Sometimes we'll just go to a gym and sign up, and then hope that we keep going back, or we'll even take that next step and get a personal trainer to come in, work with us, get us set up on some programs, stuff like that. One approach that, we would take with ABA, let's use a pretty simple one, right? Is the BST model, with how to perform a certain exercise correctly, right? So if you're working with a personal trainer, right, they may be either just giving you the instructions, or maybe not modeling, or maybe they're not providing descriptive feedback, right? Or providing the proper amount of reinforcement on a certain schedule, right? Those are all behavioral modification strategies or techniques that we can then, consult with the personal trainer, right? So as the BCBA doing ABA in this realm, right? That is my core sort of area, is looking at the behavior modification procedures, not necessarily are they doing the form correctly? Are they, like the whole personal, let me make sure I'm saying this correctly. It's not the kinesiology aspect of it, of like the muscle movements and stuff like that. And that's where we consult with the personal trainer, the same way that, our current BCBAs within the autism world will consult with the speech language pathologist, or with the,
I love that,
or like with an OT or with the PT, right, to help develop goals for either the IEP or just for their individualized behavior plan.
Nice.
But for us, right, we are consulting with those personal trainers to say, okay, hey, these are their goals. They want to get, they want to lose this many pounds. Like, what is a good exercise routine for them to be able to meet that?
Yeah.
And so then, they'll give whatever recommendations are going to be best for them. And then from there, we'll say, okay, hey, coach, let's go over some different strategies that you can do to better help get their form cleaned up much quicker, right? And that's, going into the BST model, right? What kind of feedback are you giving? How often are you giving the feedback, right? Are you modeling at all? Right? And how much are they practicing? And then, right? And then at the end there, right? What's the level, but also schedule reinforcement? We can also talk about differential reinforcement, right? And then shaping, and all these different techniques to help the trainer then help improve sort of their job to then their client to progress as well. If we're looking at from the perspective of performance, the way that we measure performance is going to be optimal for determining your superior or most, let's say, elite athlete. Right. So if we have two people that are doing push-ups and they both can do 10 push-ups, right? Let's say person A can do 10 push-ups, person B can do 10 push-ups, right? And then you ask the question, who's the strongest? Well, who's the more superior athlete, right? You would say, maybe B because I like the letter B. So B would be your stronger athlete, right? But then, right, if we then throw in some measures and some more discrete sort of data collection procedures, and we say, okay, hey, person A can do 10 push-ups in 1 minute. Person B can do 10 push-ups in 5 minutes, right? We would then, okay, who's the stronger athlete there? We're more than likely to say person A is your stronger athlete because they're able to then do it within that shorter time frame, which then leads them to saying, right, they're more fluent in the behavior or they're more fluent within that exercise, which, Skinner talks about frequency of behavior really determines, right, mastery or fluency over just kind of percentage of correct. Because like I said, versus that first example, they both got 100%.
Yes.
But the second one of them got 10 per minute, other one got 10 per 5 minute.
Yep.
If you're then a coach or a recruiter, or you're looking to give out scholarships, and you need something to measure that on and determine which athlete should I go with, right? There's a clear separation in performance, and I think that's where ABA can really come in and sort of help with that as well.
Wow, right on. Okay, so well, first off, you're clearly Kirk has clearly converted you to a lover of PT. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's clear here. And I think this is a great way of kind of, for some of the newbie folks out there, it's another great way to sort of explain kind of how persistent teaching works and what fluency means. When you're so a couple questions here, and I don't know if I'll get to the second one because the first one always seems to lead to 12 more, but Is it the BCBA doing the coaching, or are you just providing the tools and doing the measurement and whatnot, but the personal trainer is still doing the coaching?
Well, luckily for us, a lot of our trainers are certified, right, personal trainers, but they also are BCBAs as well.
Oh,
so
cool.
We have, so our personal trainers and our coaches are either BCBAs, and those will be our, program managers. We also have certified nutritionists who also have BCBAs.
Wow.
And then we also have BCBAs that are trained and have experience, where if we want to talk about, right, pushing through like the mental, right, trying to change your lifestyle, really, 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 really trying to view your life's input but also output differently, right, trying to reduce the negative self-talk, increase, more leisure time activities, stuff like that, whatever you want to do sort of within that sort of whole mental health realm. We also have BCBAs and BCBADs actually that are trained within acceptance and commitment therapy. And speaking of that, one thing that we've been sort of getting into with acceptance and commitment therapy is looking at BCBA burnout within the field.
Okay.
In our career, and how that affects, their just overall whole health and mental health.
Yeah.
We've been kind of exploring those different options and sort of different ideas, and we're putting together something cool here for the fall for those who are interested in sort of learning more about that and how we approach that from, like I said, like from the whole health aspect. I feel like we've gotten away from your question.
No worries. Yeah. No, I think you answered my question already. So this act thing that you guys are putting together for the fall, is this related to just BCBAs in general that are burning out, or are these related to like a sports kind of focus?
So TeamABA isn't just sports directed. So we're just like I mentioned, right? We do athletics, we do nutrition, but also whole health, right? And that's like, mental health, mental stability and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And that's where, we have our personal trainers for strength conditioning, We have our specific specialized coaches for, basketball. We got volleyball down in New Orleans. We have our own gym out in DC, actually, where we do strength and conditioning classes out there. Group classes, we do one-on-one, and then we're going to do basketball camps there. And then out here in California, we're getting ready to do another basketball camp out near Ontario, actually next month. So we have the basketball sports side, and then we have our nutritionists, which are located some on the East Coast and some out here in Southern California. But we're able to do virtual consultation for those who, want to look at, like I said, just getting either eating better diets, or just want to kind of get a change of pace and then the ACT stuff. So it's not necessarily just limited to sports. Now, to kind of go back and address the question, where does the ACT fit in with sports? It doesn't necessarily fit in with sports, but it does fit in within, just like I said, like the overall sort of whole health, right? So, and actually it does, now that I think about it, it does fit into sports. I'm going to try to use this reference, and maybe you could follow along with me.
Sure.
You know who Kobe Bryant is, correct?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so he had a slang or a phrase that he would say that he would use when he was on the court playing ball, and it's, late in the game, fourth quarter or whatever. He would say, I would go into what he called the Mamba mentality. And what that is the idea of never losing confidence within itself, never or reducing negative self-talk, performing at maximum level, and then just continuing just to push forward, right? So if he would have missed all 50 shots, but before the buzzer beater, right, he's still going to feel just as confident during the buzzer beater shot. Whereas other people would have started to feel a little more anxious, more depressed, and start to feel worried, like, oh, I haven't made one yet today. Maybe I shouldn't take the shot. Well, with this Mamba mentality, and that's a direction that we're trying to go in with acceptance and commitment therapy within our sports and athletic performance, is we want to get our athletes into that Mamba mentality to where even if you do make a mistake on the court or on the field, like say, for example, you throw the ball over and it causes a turnover, right? We're not dropping our heads. We're not pouting. We're not, walking back down the court. We see that as, this is just what happened, but this isn't me, right? Because what typically happens is, you do something, you do something wrong on the court, you say, I'm just a bad passer, or I really can't shoot free throws. And so instead of going into that negative talk, because then at that point, our verbal behavior controls so much of what we do, and sometimes we don't even realize it. And then we become rule governed by that verbal behavior, to where then we actually start believing that, I am not a bad, I'm not a bad passer, or I am very terrible at tackling or shooting free throws or spiking, right? So where our approach is to then, teach our athletes how to work through those sort of mistakes within the game time or within practice, recenter themselves back into the game, and then be able to perform at their top level again.
Right on. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So I haven't. I'm slowly kind of learning more about ACT, and and I love the applications, and I mean from what I've been learning, sort of most recently, it applies really nicely to sort of, kind of back to sort of the autism lens, parent training and parents who feel like they're horrible parents, and you say those sorts of things, and I'll never be able to get my child to do this, or I'm always going to be whatever sort of negative statement here, and that makes perfect sense to sort of transfer those techniques to the athlete who has the negative self-talk, or really to anyone, I suppose, that feels like and certainly from kind of the work you're doing in terms of whole health, I'll never lose weight, or I'll never be able to run, a mile, or whatever.
Yeah. So and then sorry to go back, because I just remembered your initial question in regards to where are we specifically targeting BCBAs or other professionals with this new course or this new project.
Yes.
We are open to the general public and general professionals.
Yep.
But one thing that we wanted to kind of focus on, and this is something that I think most people will appreciate is, we definitely want to first start by taking care of our own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the whole idea of, okay, hey, let's see how we can better other BCBAs and sort of better our industry, because there's tons of CEUs, there's tons of workshops that are starting to come out now in regards to talking about burnout, stuff like that. And we want to be able to contribute to that as well, because not only will that help our field as a whole, right? But then we're able to reduce the burnout, help clients, whether they're in autism field, OBM field, or whatever it is, still allow them to get services, right? We can then ensure that our services are staying strong and have strong integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the more people burn out, right, the less people do and the less people care.
Yeah.
And so, and this is, this kind of just like randomly thinking, right? If our BCBAs that are in the other industries, right, like autism care, OBM and stuff like that, right, if they're starting to burn out and then we start to get a bad rep from BCBAs and sort of those areas, it's just going to make it much harder for the others who want to disseminate to be able to kind of still hold on to that name. So, and I don't think that we're nowhere near that spot of, us being in a bad name or anything like that. But like I said, if we're trying to figure out who our first target audience will be, it's like, to me, it's like, let's take care of our own. Let's help each other out. We know what the BCBAs do. We know how they think. We know kind of the workload that they're under, the type of pressure that they're under. And, burnout is real. And a lot of the pressure from the funding sources in regards to the different changes and all these requirements, it takes toll on people, and it makes it very difficult sometimes. So, we want to be able to kind of provide something for them and for us as well.
Nice. No, I really like that. I think that I really like how you're kind of just contributing back to the community. And I think you're right. I think, and I won't try to go too far down this road today but I think in some areas our field is getting a bit of a bad name. And I do think burnout is probably one of the primary reasons for that. As soon as you have burnout, I mean, and I won't name folks or anything by any means, but we've seen examples, of prominent BCBAs doing things that, I'm sure they wish they hadn't, but that were clearly a result of, being stressed out and burnt out and whatnot. But then those sorts of behaviors, and I think we see this even more so, and maybe you'll go there as well, but I think we see this even more so in our RBTs. I think our RBTs are burning out even faster than our BCBAs, because they're getting paid so much less and they're doing the frontline work and dealing with, the challenging behavior right sort of in the face. And again, they get burnt out. They, maybe they say something they wish they didn't say, or they, or maybe they've shoved a kid away who's been hitting at them because they just can't handle it anymore. And not to say that excuses shoving a child by any means, but the reason is burnout. The reason isn't, necessarily the field. It's burnout, but people are going to interpret that as being the field. And so I think you really are doing a service, even if you only get to a few folks initially, you are doing a service to sort of better the impression of others of our field.
Yeah, because the question comes down to, right, what state of sort of mind or state of MO are you bringing to work with you that morning or that afternoon? And so, by any means, right, I haven't been in that situation. Very, very lucky to not have seen any of those examples that you just mentioned. And I hope to not see anything like that. But I think that if, it is very possible, even if the person isn't trying to be malicious at all, right? It just happened to be the condition under which they came into work that day after being, stressed out, or, pulled too thin, or, whatever the case is for the past couple of days, past couple of weeks, or maybe the past couple of months, into where if they don't have any, first of all, if they're able to recognize that burnout is occurring within their own behavior, but then also not only recognizing, but then knowing kind of different ideas, different strategies for them to do to kind of help address the burnout, or at least kind of reduce some of it to where they can kind of at least bridge themselves until they get off work or until they make it to the weekend, so that they can really decompress and sort of allow themselves to reset. Because a lot of us that are in the field of ABA, we love what we do. At least the folks that I've met and have worked with, everyone that I've met, that have been experienced with, they love what they do and they enjoy doing the science. But at the same time, you pin someone in a corner, they only have so many options. And so we want to make sure that those folks who love what they do never feel forced into a corner to where they have to, start reverting to other means to kind of get their stress relieved.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I can totally see how the whole health perspective that TeamABA brings, can totally be applied there. I mean, I can definitely see the value of sort of, ACT strategies to help folks kind of get out of funks. But, you got to have a good sleep. You got to have a good diet, and you got to have regular exercise to feel good. And, it's not necessarily about being an athlete, but just about sort of, all those other components are so huge and sort of preventing burnout as well. Will this program that you're doing in the fall be a whole health kind of program, or just ACT focused?
It'll be the foundation will be based on ACT, but it would be in the sort of whole health direction.
Yeah.
Of just like you said, right? How's your sleep? How's your eating? How's your physical activity? But then also, right, I think one thing that wasn't mentioned was, what about your social? Right? How often are you talking to people? How often are you communicating with people? Not just your coworkers or your supervisor, right? Because those are different relationships, and you can't have the same type of conversations with them.
Yeah.
To where, you can decompress, or you can sort of get things off your chest.
Totally.
So, how is your social coming along as well, for them to kind of help find that balance if they need to? For this project is it's sort of just like a 5-week program to where people can sign up and, learn. And it's going to be like a classroom based setup. It's going to be CEUs offered as well. Yeah, it's going to be really cool. Like we're like I said, right now we're in the midst of putting it all together. We're looking to launch August. So for those who are interested, definitely reach out. There will be stuff coming out here pretty soon for it. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be primarily looking at, right, how can we address our sort of burnout and our health? How do we identify it? How do we work through it? And then once we get past that, how do we then sort of dip it in the bud early if it starts to come about again?
Nice.
And like I said, it's not just for BCBAs, we're open to all professionals. But as I mentioned earlier, we want to start with taking care of our own. And that's what we're going to kind of market towards first.
The second secret word is nutrition. I've been taking notes here, and my previous question about sort of, do you pass on the skills to the coach and so on, and the fact that you have personal trainers and nutritionists that are also BCBAs. I kind of want to just touch on those folks for a minute, because I mean that's just I think that's just so cool to have to sort of see BCBA, associated with these other professions. So for the nutritionists and the personal trainers, were these folks first nutritionists and personal trainers and then went and got their BCBA, or was it the other way around?
That's a good question. I believe they were, I think we have a combination of both.
Yeah.
I think there were individuals who, started within the BCBA track and then always had, and then, sort of similar to me, right, always had their foot or their interest in sports, health, or fitness or nutrition. And so, once they got their BCBA, they then went to go get their nutrition certification.
Totally.
There's other folks that just came out and were just very heavy into sports, maybe played professionally or maybe played semi-pro, and then got in and then was in that realm and got all their certifications kind of out the way. and then they got some exposure into ABA or BCBA, and sort of wanted to kind of merge those two together.
Mm-hmm.
So it's honestly, I believe, this combination of both.
Yeah,
and it's very, very, very fortunate, really.
Totally. Like, were these folks, and you may not know the history, but, and I know some are on the East Coast, some on the West Coast. Were these folks recruited with all these certifications, or were these things that they kind of developed as they started working for you?
They were recruited because of their certifications. So
amazing.
So they already had. So yeah, I mean, especially when the pandemic hit, health and exercise and strong lungs and immune system was very heavily pushed.
Totally.
And so I think that pushed a lot of folks just within our country into, okay, let's start taking more control of our health. And so, and that, like I said, that bleeds into our industry as well, to where those who already had their BCBAs, they're like, let's start looking into these other certifications. I want to be able to practice but also know for myself. And so a lot of the folks, they were either already certified, both BCBA and either personal training or nutritionist, or they were already enrolled in their course and they were getting ready to sit for their exam.
Mm-hmm. Super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool. I just love this sort of. I'm not actually. I'm excited about it, but I'm not going to do it. But I'm pretty happy where I am right now. But I love the idea of, BCBAs, or that are, or folks with other credentials that are then grabbing the BCBA so they can, basically really refine and improve, the good work they're already doing, using that as sort of a complementary piece. I just think that's so amazing. I think it just sort of sends a message to folks out there that, like, I think of just the nutritionist alone, there's so many options there. There's so many other options for a BCBA besides autism if you just sort of, visualize it and go for it. I'm thinking about, we talked a bit in our pre-chat about, I mentioned Todd Ward.
Yes.
He's folks in kind of our realm will know him because of, I think he's sort of well known for a lot of his early kind of blog, the behavior science in the 21st century, and kind of really was one of our early, kind of online disseminators. And he recently moved completely out of the autism world into a solar energy consulting, but using, his BCBA as sort of a way to sort of, help teach folks about solar energy and kind of shape the environment. I don't know much about it. If folks kind of want to hear more about him, I was going to have him on the podcast, and then discovered that just a week prior, he had done a full podcast on, I believe it's called The Bearded Behaviorist with, I think it's Brian Middleton. And so check that out if you're interested in kind of hearing more about what Todd's doing. After that podcast came out, I was like, no, Brian took care of it. I don't need to go there. But just, but one of his messages kind of as he left the field was, if you got a passion, or you got an interest of any kind, go do it and bring your BCBA with you. It's a great way to kind of disseminate the field to sort of other realms. And it's also, you can also bring back your knowledge back to the ABA field and share it even more. And so I just think it's great that are bringing on this sort of variety of different folks that are, have a special interest in certain areas, but top it off with the BCBA. I was wondering, what's sort of been the response of well, first, kind of a two-part question. What's sort of been the response of the consumer? So I imagine for folks that maybe have done personal training before, or visited a nutritionist before, or even, been coached in a sport before, different experience. And sort of the part, and so I'm curious sort of how they're receiving it. And sort of the part B of the question was, you had mentioned, about how you were, and maybe this was more for an example, but you were mentioning about how, if say a recruiter was coming in, and they wanted to sort of compare the two folks, and you have that offer, you have that new measure of fluency to offer. I'm also curious how folks sort of from outside the ABA world receive fluency as a measure. So
Yeah.
So a couple questions there.
No worries. So I think I can hit them all. So I think right from the consumer's perspective, how are they responding to it? They love it, really, honestly, from the sports side of it, right? But also, honestly, I think from all of it, right? So the sports, right? If we're looking at strength and conditioning, but also nutrition, right? If we're approached by someone who has this goal, or they have this deadline or timeline on where they want to meet this goal, feedback is pretty much gold for them, right? How well am I doing this so far, right? Is my time being utilized well, right? And so looking at the different methods and procedures that we use, right, with the chart, because like I said, we're graphing all practice data, but also game time performance for athletes. But then, right, training or nutrition, right, we're collecting data and we're graphing all of their stuff too. And so, for someone who feels like they may not have lost a lot of weight, within a month, or and maybe they step on the scale and maybe they haven't, right? Because sometimes your muscles outweigh the fat, and there's just so many different things that's going on within your body to where that number on the scale might not actually reflect the progress that's being made. However, we can show them on the chart and say, hey, you did run 5 miles each week for the past 4 weeks, whereas previously you were able to only run 2 miles or 3 miles, right? So that type of feedback is lovely for them. And then from the recruiter's perspective, right, all athletes, all they want to talk about is their stats, really. How many points did you have? How many turnovers did you have, right? So, like I said, we collect practice data and game time data. The team that we worked with out in St. Louis, all of the basketball players wanted to see all of their charts every day after practice, even after their fluency drill.
So cool.
Because it's like I said, like they wanted to see if they were getting better. They wanted to, and then they wanted to, for bragging rights amongst the team, a little friendly competition. But then on top of all of that, when we chart, we're actually creating full-on training reports. So where we're writing out our objectives, writing out our pinpoints and our goals, stuff like that, and we're adding all of that in there to where we're creating this sort of document that they can not only read for themselves to assess, but they can package this with their film or their highlight tape, and they can show the recruiters and say, hey, yeah, I am able to do really well on my best of best, mixtape highlight reel. But however, here's the data for the full season. Here's my practice data as well, right? And so in this, like I said, it's not only just charts, but we give those summaries and sort of future predictions to allow the coaches, or the recruiters to take a look at the data and say, yeah, like they are able to perform consistently throughout the season or throughout practice. And this is how they progress. And this is where we can predict their performance for maybe next year or maybe for the next game. Obviously, nothing's going to be perfect in our predictions, right? There's so many confounds and so many external variables that get in the way. But, right, all behavior is lawful.
Yeah.
If we can mirror similar stimulus conditions, we should be able to mirror that type of performance. And then I forgot your last. I was on a roll, and I forgot your last one.
No, that was it. That was it.
Question.
No, you got it. You got it. You done it. Yeah. No, there's only 2 questions, but there was a few parts in them. No, you answered them perfectly. Good job. I appreciate also your ability in this interview to keep track of the questions I've asked, because I keep forgetting them as we tangent off, and you've been doing such a great job of coming back to the original question. So I do appreciate that. And I'm not looking for names or anything, but is there anyone else doing this kind of thing? Or is this like a TeamABA, pioneered, sort of approach to, sort of whole health and athleticism? I have heard a bit of it in terms of tag teaching. And I've heard of tag teaching being used in some sports instruction, particularly I think gymnastics and dancing and sort of those sorts of things, where they're, sort of teaching specific moves using those. And I don't want to butcher the names, but there's terms for sort of, similar to kind of the pinpoint in tag teaching. There's terms for sort of describing each of those particular actions. Are there other folks out there that are doing this, or at least, and if there are, is anyone doing this at the same level as you folk? I'm thinking no. The third secret word is sports.
I think at the same level and scope that we're doing it, there's no one else doing it, right? Because we have, like I said, we have our TeamABA, which is sports, nutrition. Sorry, TeamABA is just sports, and that's right. We do individual training. That's across volleyball, basketball, soccer, and golf. We have our TeamABA wellness, which is we're looking at right the whole health, which is nutrition.
Yep.
We do strength and conditioning. But then also we do the sort of the whole health mental approach through acceptance and commitment therapy. And then lastly, we have our TeamABA University, which we host webinar series. We host CEU events. We just wrapped up our second 5-week course on practicing behavior analysis in sports health and fitness. We do an intro into kind of how to get started within sports health and fitness, and then we wrap up with the entrepreneurship class, right? Because there's a lot of, I don't know of any, there might be some, but most of our BCBA programs don't go into entrepreneurship or professional development outside of clinical settings. And so we want to offer that as well to our BCBAs, right? Because as a BCBA, you have an opportunity to sort of start your own venture, really. If you have enough capital, you can go out there and get your tax ID and get up and running. But there's just not a lot of entrepreneurship training within graduate programs, and so we offer that as well on how folks can get started within health and fitness. And then we also have a supervision program for students who want to collect independent field hours, and it's more of like a practicum program to where you work directly with an athlete. We guide you through some behavioral assessments. We guide you through the sport-specific assessment, whether it's basketball, football, or if it's nutrition, right? We do our food diaries and stuff like that. And you're being, like I said, right, depending on what area you want to get supervision in, we'll pair you up with that actual certified nutritionist or certified PT or the, content expert of that sport. They also will be BCBAs as well who have taken the 8-hour supervision course. And then you work through our 6-month curriculum. You can get, I think you earn up to either more than half of your field hours. And we pair them directly. Each week it's paired with the task list. And so even though our exam isn't heavy on sports health and fitness yet, we understand that, and we know that we still need to relate, some of these ideas and topics back to the autism world or back to the OBM and back to school settings. But we also want to give them that exposure into, okay, this is how it looks within sports health and fitness as well. And so, so like I said, all of our BCBAs are active and supervised, credentialed, and all the work that they do is all behavior modification sort of training. So we are staying within the BACB code and guidelines for supervision because we're doing all behavior modification stuff, right? We're looking at the antecedent variables. We're, looking at different reinforcement procedures. We're looking at the graphs and the data and acceleration, and we're doing, those type of analyses to where, we can actually write off for independent field hours for our supervision program. So to answer your initial question, no one's doing it at the level that we're doing it, but there are other folks, and I don't remember their names. It's not that I don't want to say their name. I just don't remember a lot of their names. I know
it's all good.
I know there's someone in Philadelphia. I don't want to say the wrong state. Someone up.
It's okay.
East Coast. He does some football stuff with some professional athletes. I know there's a young lady out in Florida that does a certification course as well, sports health and fitness. And then you have your behavior chef who does stuff.
Right, of course, yeah.
And then, just like I said, I just can't remember the names on top of my head. I would love to give them a shout out.
No worries. And so that actually was kind of leading to one of my last questions is around, and again, I don't actually do precision teaching either, but I think it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
First off, and this isn't a question for you, but I had always wondered why, the field in general, and we can go on that tangent another day, but why the field in general doesn't sort of, particularly the early intervention field, why they all don't do precision teaching all the time. Like it blows my mind. It's just such an amazing, super sensitive measure and gives you just so much more detail and so much more rich results. The question I have though is, it seems like, and maybe it's sort of the same dynamic, but it seems like the performance measures that you folks are putting into place, the detailed reports, just all the fluency measures, the charting, in a field, like you said, that loves statistics and loves those numbers. Have you folks noticed, as you've been doing this for a while now, has there been interest? I don't even know if I'm wording this question right, but maybe you can just try to answer it anyway. But has there been interest sort of from, other sports groups, sports teams, coaches just doing other stuff that aren't BCBAs that kind of want to bring some of these measures, some of this technology kind of into their work, but maybe getting a BCBA isn't something that's in the cards, but they would like, just even a sports team that has a coaching program that wouldn't mind adding some of these pieces. Like, have you run into any of that yet?
Yeah, some of the coaches that we work with, one of the first basketball teams we worked with, like I said, they didn't know anything about it before we, stepped into the gym with them. Yeah. However, after they saw kind of what we were doing and how we were doing it, they were then willing and wanting to sit in on our practice fluency drills and just watch their athletes, go through the drills, but also see, how well it's going. And so afterwards, right, they would come to us, ask us questions, try to figure out, okay, how come you did this instead of that? Like, what would you recommend for me to do next time? So yeah, we've been getting a lot of interest from the non-ABA personnel after seeing what we do, and that within itself is, super motivating for us, right? Because, stepping into a new world or sort of a new arena can always be intimidating because you don't ever know what they're going to think of you or, what they're going to say about you. And so, getting that kind of feedback, even though it's not the direct, hey, I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. It's more along the lines of, oh, I saw that you did this. How do I get that to work for this kid as well? Or, vice versa. And so it's just been very motivating and very encouraging for us starting out, trying to get into this sort of new world to kind of get that kind of feedback and for those folks to be as receptive to it has been changing. It's just been awesome.
That's really cool. Yeah. I'm hoping this is happening in other fields too, but, I think you folks are really pioneering something that has an opportunity to really, I think, do more at disseminating ABA than we've ever been able to do. It's just health and sports and those sorts of things are such a broader impact and a broader population, and the benefits are just can be so quick, I think.
Yeah.
One other question I have, and I don't even know what it is, but it's based on some notes that I took from our pre-chat that it sounded cool, and I said I'm going to ask Wes about this again. Tell me about this 3-on-3 basketball league.
Oh yes, so we have. Oh man. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. It's been a while since I talked about it. So TeamABA, we've actually acquired a facility out in the DC, Rockville, Maryland area.
Okay.
So where, we have a basketball court, we can convert it to volleyball court, we can set up cones for soccer, and then there's also a little bit of area for weightlifting and strength and conditioning and stuff like that.
Perfect.
But our goal here, right, with our basketball training is to essentially set up a league for the youth, right? Because just with the pandemic and everything like that, a lot of people have just been kind of stuck in the house and have been able to get out and exercise and train a lot more. But I'm sure the kids are dying to get out and get back out running again and stuff like that. And so what we want to do is offer a league for the summer for youth athletes to kind of get good proper training through fluency training throughout the week. And then on the weekends, we will have games for all of the teams so that they have an opportunity to then practice the skills. So it's, if you think about it, it's just ABA 101 right there.
Yeah.
Right. So we go through the teaching part of it and shaping. We go through the fluency training throughout practice. And then on the weekends, right, it's generalization. Right. How much more ABA can I get with that one? You know what I mean?
Cool. Yeah, totally.
And so we're opening that up here. I believe registration may be already open, but you know, we just want to be able to provide an opportunity for, you know, athletes or, you know, students who, you know, may not already be that well experienced within certain sports or basketball or have an AAU team. I mean, because that's what it all boils down to is which AAU team are you on for basketball, and then how many games are you getting in within a year, and who's coming out to see you. And so in order to kind of get some of these athletes on, I guess, or in within that circuit, you know, we're able to provide the fluency training on some of the basic fundamentals and then rolling into more high complex skills, and to helping them get into that AAU circuit if they want to. But then, you know, it's also the opportunity just to go out and just, you know, learn a new sport, have fun, socialize, you know, meet other peers and you know, other kids, and just an opportunity for, you know, for the kids to be out and just up and running. So that's something that we want to do. Like I say, we want to give back and allow resources and opportunities for the community while doing a little ABA as well.
Cool. That's so cool. And not to mention, maybe just another way to introduce the field to a younger generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Wow. Really cool stuff, Wes. I knew this was going to be a fun conversation, but I didn't realize it would be this fun, especially for a guy like me who's never really been much into sports. You know, I think I'm a little more into it now. I think I might have to go pump up that basketball and go down and shoot a couple hoops and maybe take a little data while I'm at it.
There you go. Well, if you film it, I'll provide you some feedback.
Oh gosh, I'm not sure if we're gonna go there, but maybe if I can film it and you only see my arms, and you don't, and I can pretend I'm somebody else. Who knows? That's wicked. Okay, cool. Well, thanks again for coming on the podcast. Really cool. I think folks are really going to get a lot out of this, and really, you know, especially folks that are, you know, thinking maybe they'd like to try to do something different with their degree, and also I think we've got a lot of folks out there that are parents that have kids that play sports. A lot of folks out there that probably play sports themselves that wouldn't mind that believe in the science, but you know, haven't had a way to sort of apply that to their own lives. So knowing that TeamABA is out there as an option, I think is great, and we'll have, like I said, all the links and whatnot in our show notes so folks can come find you. And just thanks again for being on. Super awesome.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was a blast. Thank you.